Welcome, everyone, to week 2 of the Leadership Alliance Professional Development Workshop Series. My name is Dr. Taiese Bingham-Hickman, Executive Director of the Leadership Alliance and Assistant Vice President of Pathways and Pipelines at Brown University. And it is my pleasure to serve as the moderator for today's session. We are excited to host this virtual dynamic workshop created by the Leadership Alliance Executive Office and our valued partners to strengthen skill building, foster meaningful connections, and expand exposure to graduate education and research opportunities. The enthusiasm for this event has been extraordinary, and we are proud to share that more than 600 students have registered. The workshop series, paired with our Wednesday evening sessions, will engage you in timely and thought-provoking conversations, expose you to critical issues shaping academia and research, and create opportunities to network with peers, mentors, and our exceptional Leadership Alliance Doctoral Scholars. Most importantly, we aim to equip you with practical strategies, insights, and skills to successfully navigate your academic and research journey. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce Leadership Alliance Doctoral Scholar, Dr. Tonya Webb. Tonya Webb is a professor of microbiology and immunology, assistant dean of student engagement and student life at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, and serves as the associate director of workforce excellence and development for the Greenbaum Comprehensive Cancer Institute or Cancer Center. She is a leading immunologist and research scientist whose roles reflect her longstanding commitment to advancing representation in research. She directs 3 training programs that broaden participation in cancer research by fostering an inclusive culture and supporting scientific innovation. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Tonya Webb. Thank you, Dr. Webb, for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So we had a number of questions from students, and we tried to group the questions because there were so many. But we had quite a few questions about your inspiration and why you chose the career path that you did. So we can start with that. So looking back on your career journey, what inspired you to pursue a PhD instead of medical school? And how did that choice help build a career that integrates both scientific research and mentorship for you?
Yes, thanks. So I love talking about this because actually it was my participation in the Leadership Alliance. I was a biology major pre-med in undergrad, and the Leadership Alliance provided my first research opportunity. And it was at Dartmouth, and I absolutely loved it. I thought, I can pipette, I can really do this. I was reading a book at the time about the 1953 medical class at Harvard. And in the book, it talked about there not being a lot of treatments and cures. And when I started doing research, I thought the same. There was a limit on the number of treatments and cures that were available. And my project focused on developing a vaccine for HIV. And I had done some work in high school with the United Way, providing information. And so to be in a lab where we were working on something that didn't have a cure was really impactful and really meaningful. And I thought, this is great. I have a lot of questions, and I would get paid to do research and do experiments to address those questions and be able to travel and talk about it. And so it was really enlightening, and it really changed my career path.
And what would you say got you interested in microbiology and immunology and ultimately becoming a professor?
So actually, again, it starts there where I was working on the vaccine for HIV. So then I thought that I would be a virologist, and I did another summer program the following summer, and it was on transcription factor, something completely different. But I really felt like viruses, understanding them would be key, and I could really have an impact on that area. And during this time, my grandfather had prostate cancer, and I watched him battle the disease for 10 years. And so throughout my training, in the back of my mind, I kept thinking about other aspects of science. And so eventually, during my second postdoc, I worked in a cancer immunotherapy lab. And working in that lab really showed me how you could have a direct impact on human health. And I was able to get a K award, and that really cemented my desire. I felt like I can get funding to do the work that I want to do. And so that ultimately drove me into the career path that I have.
Interesting. Um, and so I'm sure you had mentors along the way. What experiences or mentors would you say were the most influential in helping you, choose the career path that you did?
So I think mentorship is critical and it's really key. And so I had mentors from high school that helped me. I had mentors in undergrad who really pushed me. I attended Prairie View A&M University, and a lot of the conversation centered on Black excellence. And I felt like my mentors there really instilled in me confidence and self-belief and self-love, which I think is really important. Also, the desire to learn more. So I talked about being intrigued and saying, oh, I can answer these questions. I love the pipette. I could really get into this. But I didn't know anyone who had this career path. And so those college professors were really instrumental in showing me the path and saying, okay, this is what you have to do to be successful. And then in my summer programs, I was challenged. So every Wednesday, my research advisor had me go to the library and learn immunology. And I was like, this is the hardest thing that I've ever had to do. And if I could get this, I could do anything. And so that shaped me. And then my mentor in the second program actually ended up being my advisor for my first postdoc. And his name is Dr. David Wilkes. And he was a physician scientist, and we worked in on transplant in his lab. He was in internal medicine, but again, being able to see how the work in the lab really could have an impact on human health was very encouraging, highly influential, and to see someone, a person of color, being able to move the field forward and being a decision maker and a thought leader really was inspirational.
Thank you for sharing that. And then kind of building on that, what would you say, what made you interested in, you talked a little bit about your experience at Prairie View A&M in terms of Black excellence, but what would you say kind of inspired you to focus on increasing representation in cancer research in particular? And what changes have you seen as a result, either of your efforts or in the field?
So I think that again, I had a really strong foundation built at Prairie View, and then I went to Indiana University for my doctoral studies, and there weren't a lot of people who looked like me at the institution at the time. And so I felt like a change needed to be made. And if I could have a positive impact and bring in more people, then that would be great. So during that time, they called it Caravan, and we went on a lot of recruitment trips to the Big Ten schools. And again, whenever we were traveling through and trying to recruit, there weren't a lot of people of color. And I feel like your lived experiences help you design your experimental questions and it views the way that you look at science and what you think is important. And so I feel that increasing diversity and increasing representation helps us ask different questions, helps guide experiments in different ways. And so that really pushed me to stay focused on a career in academia because I was like, I could be a part of that process, bringing in people and having that spark and showing them the excitement and being able to help facilitate their career development. And then over time, I was able to start my own summer program, which is fantastic. And then I also have a post-bac program. And so I feel that I've had a lot of opportunities to get to where I am. And so being able to contribute to that and see young scientists have a positive impact on the way we move the field forward has been very rewarding.
Thank you. And can you talk a little bit about some of the training programs that you lead that aim to promote inclusion in scientific research, and what have you observed as far as the impact on aspiring scientists and scholars?
So I have a summer program. It's funded through the American Cancer Society, and it started in 2021, so right after the pandemic. And so it was really a pilot program, very, very small. And it started with 4 students, and we've been able to grow the program. But what I've seen is just giving the opportunity can have a really impactful change. For example, in that first program, I had 4 students. One is currently finishing his second year of medical school, and he started in the program as a freshman. So he was able to graduate college early and is and received a scholarship that covers his medical school, which is fantastic. Another person, her family's from Trinidad. She was a first generation scientist, and she really loved working in the lab. And being a part of the program made her want to do additional research. She ended up working for the DoD, and now she just completed a training program, a master's in education, so she can go back and be a high school teacher and give this foundational knowledge to trainees. Another one is currently working in a lab and applying for medical school. And the other student is in a master's in an MPH program, a master's in public health. And she works with Planned Parenthood, and the impact that she's had on the program itself. She talked about the way that you teach people about themselves and about their bodies, and that again had an impact on the way that I present information. So I feel again I can talk about the first year program, right, and all of the students, and each successive year. And so again, I think that they've had an impact on the field and on our local communities. They all participate in community service, and then they've also had an impact on our institution. So I feel that it's been beneficial for them and it's been beneficial for us.
Excellent. Well, I know we have a number of very talented and competitive students on with us today. So what advice would you give them when they're looking for opportunities for programs such as yours or other research-related opportunities? What advice would you give them in order to help prepare them for the application?
I would say stay motivated, stay encouraged, and stay ready, because you never know when the opportunity will present itself. For example, for me to participate in a Leadership Alliance program, I just went to a career panel, and someone came from Dartmouth and he was recruiting, and I just happened to give my resume, and he said, I think you'll be great at research. And I was like, I'm pre-med. I was really set on going to medical school. And he was like, I really think that you will be great. And I was like, okay. And I took advantage of that opportunity. And you see, it completely changed my career trajectory. And then I would say to stay with your purpose, like know what you want to do and stay encouraged, because a lot of things will happen. You can second guess yourself, but you're here for a reason. You have a purpose. So keep that in mind. And again, move with intention, because so many things will happen in life. You can have health issues, family issues, financial issues. Something can happen with your significant other, or your partner, or your family. Um, and so many things will, again, happen, but you have to stay focused and you have to do what you need to do to take care of yourself, your mental health, right? You need to be physically ready, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. But if you take care of that and remember what your goals are, then you can be successful.
Thank you. And kind of leading into that, we had a number of questions for you about how you balance your roles, because you're obviously doing a number of things in leadership position, in a leadership role, I should say. So how do you balance your operational and your scientific endeavors, and how much time would you say you commit to either your deanship or your director position?
Those are a great question. I feel like it's still a work in progress. I'm trying to prioritize and balance everything. But remember to prioritize what is really important to you because you are talented, highly successful, and you can do many things. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so if you commit to something, you should follow through. So if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to try my very best to do it. Um, but again, I can't do everything. And so every week I set goals and try to figure out what I can accomplish and what's really important and make sure that I'm able to see that through. For example, I have the summer program, and right now we meet the first week of the program. The students are with me from 9 to 5, and so that takes up a lot of time. But I know that that's really important, and it's important for me for them to have a level of comfortability, and so I set everything around that. I have a research lab, and so I want to make sure that my students and postdocs and everyone is successful. So I make sure I have time and space for that. And then, as part of my roles in the Cancer Center and with the dean's office, we are really focused on student success. And so I'm developing a first gen program that's really important. And so I want to make sure that what we push forward is really beneficial to the students. And so we have a task force. We meet with the students and make sure that what I have in mind and what I think would help aid in their success is really what they're looking for. So again, it's about keeping everything in balance, making sure that you prioritize and you're able to manage your time. And also, just to go back on a question that you asked previously about giving advice, I've had students in the lab from high schoolers to medical residents, fellows, and everyone is really smart and driven, but I can't give you that personal motivation. So when I'm looking for people to join the group, I'm making sure that they are excited about what they're doing, they're motivated, because I can teach you the basic lab skills, but I can't give you that, again, that drive and motivation. So when you're interviewing, make sure that that comes across. You don't know everything. I don't know everything. When you come into the field, it's your ability to ask questions and be excited and motivated and curious is what makes you a great person to be in that space. It would makes you a great team player, which makes me want to give you that opportunity.
Thank you. And can you talk a little bit about your personal experience in terms of overcoming some challenges when you were obtaining your master's or a PhD? Did you face any adversity, and how did you navigate that as a person of color in STEM?
So I mentioned that it wasn't very diverse. So actually, one of my great friends and colleagues from the Virgin Islands and I were the first people of color to graduate with a Ph.D. in the Department of Microbiology and Immunology at Indiana University. And so it was very challenging to be the first. And then throughout my career, I obtained tenure in 2020, and I was the first Black female in the School of Medicine with a PhD to be tenured, receive tenure at the School of Medicine. So it's been very, very challenging. I've been very blessed, but again, there's been a lot of challenges along the way. Uh, And I mentioned that the things will happen. So I have 2 kids. So during that time, trying to manage having a family life, trying to make sure that my career moves forward, getting grants, making sure my students are successful. All of those things happen along the way. My mom is a 2-time cancer survivor, working in the lab and also making sure that I'm there present for family is also important. So again, so many things will happen, but you have to stay focused and know who you are and what your purpose is. And family and friends are critically important. So make sure that while you're making sure that you are doing what you need to do to have a successful career, you're still present and available for your family.
Thanks for sharing that. And what made you choose Indiana University? What attracted you to that institution?
So that's a great question because coming from Texas, it's very, very warm. I'm originally from Charlotte, North Carolina. And so it was a culture shock to move to Indiana. It was that first winter was a challenge. But I was really excited because I mentioned that my first research experience was working on a vaccine for HIV. I was very interested in the field of virology, and the chair of the department at the time had recruited 5 new faculty from the NIH. So they had all finished their postdocs at the NIH and were joining the the faculty in the department. And they were all excited about their research. They had funding and support and were willing to take students. And 2 of them were virologists, and all of them were emerging leaders in the field. And so I did a summer program there. I should tell you all, the summer program life is not your PhD life. You can have an amazing summer, and then it gets really real when you start graduate school. But it was really engaging, really impactful. So after going there for the summer, I was recruited, and we had these new faculty with all of these amazing new projects. And so it was a nice transition period, I thought, for me to go from being there for the summer to starting my graduate studies there.
Thank you. Um, and we had quite a few questions about, um, and I think you touched on this already, but what made you decide to pursue a PhD as opposed to an MD? Um, what are your thoughts on going for an MD PhD if you're on the fence? And as someone who obviously works in the medical school, I think, your perspective would be helpful for some students who are debating whether or not they want to go for an MD or PhD.
So I changed from uh, really being focused on an MD. And actually, my best friend from high school is a medical doctor. And I thought we would both be physicians working in the field. But that summer program really changed it for me. And I was worried. So I think that you all are exposed to so many things, which I wish that I would have had early on in my career because I may have gone the path of doing an MD and PhD because it's what drives you. I was worried at the time, the MCAT, I was taking MCAT prep courses and doing okay with the MCAT prep. Um, but I completely changed. I was worried about loans and schooling, and working in the lab seemed easy for me. I was like, this is amazing. I can do scientific experiments and answer new questions. And it was, I guess, like an engineer getting exposed for the first time to being able to problem solve. I was just like, oh, bring it at me. I have all of these questions. So I was in the lab, and we were trying to make antibodies, which are proteins that are made by B cells that can drive a protective response against HIV. But we were using animals, and I thought, why don't I develop a roller bottle system? This was in the summer program. And so I engineered this incubator that could shift and roll, and so it decreased our need for animal experiments. And they were like, what else do you have? And so I felt like that push to just be able to explore was exciting. So that pushed me towards a PhD. But I am the course director for our Molecules to Medicine course, which is a required course for our MD PhD students their first 2 years of medical school. And being a part of that course and seeing the way that if you have a medical degree, it influences the way that you ask questions, right? You see what your patients need, and you see what gaps there are in our understanding. And so you can ask those basic fundamental questions that we still don't understand, or you can do things that are clinically relevant. You can see a patient with a need and say, oh, if we had this, that would really help this particular patient subset, right? Which is really important. And so, again, I think that if I would have known about the path of doing the MD, PhD and had more information, I may have selected that path. I feel that if you have that burning desire to do research, then that's what you need for your PhD or MD, PhD, because it's a long road. It's a very, very long road. And if you like that one-on-one interaction, a patient comes in with a need and you're able to facilitate that request, you're able to help them at that time of need, then you should look into becoming a medical doctor. Again, it's a lot of sacrifice, it's a lot of hard work. But if you enjoy that interaction and being engaged, because someone will come to you in their time of need, it could be the worst day of their life, their weakest moment. And at that time, they're depending on you, they're trusting you. And if you're able to help them in that way, they're forever grateful, right? On the other hand, for MD, PhD, if you like the problem solving, if you like to be engaged, if you want to be able to see patients and help them at that time of need, but then go back to the lab and think about what tools, what reagents, what tests, what treatments, what cures could be beneficial to the field, and you're willing to spend the time, it's a lot of time, the time, energy, and dedication, and have an impact on that way, then that's great. And for MD, PhD, it's usually paid for. And so you wouldn't have to worry about paying for medical school or for your doctoral studies. And so that's a major benefit.
Thank you. And we have a question in the chat and also some questions that came in about basically how you can be competitive. Right now, it's very hard to obtain research opportunities, to obtain summer internships. So we had a question in the chat from a student about what should they be focused on. We also had some other questions about, what qualities do you think distinguish trainees or students who go on to become good scientists? So can you talk a little bit about what makes a good researcher, what makes a student competitive when it comes to seeking out these opportunities?
Yes, those are all really great questions. So I think that it is, again, I alluded to staying ready so you don't have to get ready, as cliche as it is. So when you have that opportunity, for example, for my summer program, often I take people who don't have any lab experience because somebody had to give you that first experience. And so what I'm looking for is, do you know what program you are applying to? Do you know who the faculty are? Because sometimes you'll see a lot, like someone will have a posting and you'll just quickly apply, but there are different campuses, there are different people involved. And so if you send out a message, but the investigators that you say you want to work with aren't at that institution or aren't at that campus, then someone would say they don't really know what our program has to offer, right? So focus in on the details. If someone gives you an opportunity and say, okay, we're going to do a quick Zoom meeting and ask you questions about the position, make sure that you know who is interviewing you, you know a little bit about them. You can look at them on PubMed, on Google Scholar. You don't have to know everything about their research, but just being aware of what they're doing and what the institution is trying to accomplish its mission, because a lot of times it's trying to make sure that is a good fit for you. So if you are in a small town or rural area and you're applying to a position in a major city, they may be wondering, how are you going to acclimate? Is it a big will it be a big adjustment, because they want you to be successful. So you can look into it and say, I think that I can thrive there. I think that I can be successful there. And just show them that you need that opportunity. On the other hand, if you're from a big city and you're looking at a campus that's in a rural space, they may say, well, you won't have the same activities, or again, will it be a good fit? So you need to make sure that where you're applying, you're aware of the location, you're aware if you have transportation needs, you're aware of the research. And they may ask questions about where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And so you want to think about this. It can be hard because you may think, I don't know, right? I need to see, that's so far ahead. But if everything were to happen the way that you would like for it to happen, what do you want for yourself? What do you see? Because they're trying to see how they can help you get there, right? And so think about that. And again, remember who you are. You're coming with all of your lived experiences, with your curiosity, with your intelligence. And so it's not just what they're giving you, it's what you're able to give back. So don't think about it as like, oh my goodness, this amazing institution is calling me. I can't believe it. Of course, believe it. They wouldn't contact you if they didn't think that you had the skills to be successful. So step into it and own it and say, okay, if I'm given this position, I'm going to make the best of it. And this is what I can contribute. And this is what I expect to receive in return.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would take that also and add for students who are applying either to graduate school or for a summer research opportunity, really spend time on your personal statement. Really talk about who you are, why you're interested in the experience, what's motivating you. So, Dr. Webb, you talked a little bit about your personal experience with cancer, your mother having cancer and your uncle, as well. So those are motivating factors for you. And I think for viewers, when they're looking at applications, because I also review applications, and what I'm looking for is, what is the student passionate about? Why do they want to do this research? Why are they interested in this? What adversity have they experienced in their life? And that makes them resilient and able to move through this opportunity. So those are the things that I really encourage students to focus on. So if you have an opportunity to attend a personal statement workshop, or you have a mentor that can help you with that, that really does go a long way. Um, so we have some additional questions about your mentorship, serving as a mentor. Um, And what advice would you give to your mentees, or how do you mentor them through your programs? And also, what advice would you give to students when seeking out a mentor? How did you find your mentor? Where should students start?
So mentorship is really important, and those are really great questions and points. My PhD advisor was really instrumental in guiding the way that I mentor my trainees because um, he showed me, as we all know, that everyone is really different, and what motivates you may not work for someone else. And so, for some trainees, you may want a very personalized experience. You may not have a lot of research experience. And so, you want someone that's there that can show you how to read scientific papers, how to think critically, and how to set up experiments. And you want that direct one-on-one mentorship. And that could be by the PI, it could be by a postdoc or a graduate student in the lab. Others, you've had research experience. Some of you may have been doing research since high school, and you kind of have an idea, but you just want someone there to help guide you, and you want to have more of an influence and on the shape and the drive and the uh, way that the project moves. And you just may need feedback. So you may need check-ins, regular check-ins to say, okay, that's not working. You need to pivot, or that's great. This would be the next logical step. And so when you're looking for labs, have an idea about your comfort level. And if you want someone there day by day asking you questions, making sure that you know what to do. Or if you want someone who is more standoffish and just to provide feedback at critical time points. And so, and it can be a mixture of both of those things. And again, if you thrive in a small lab where you just have a couple of people and you meet with everyone every day and you have that kind of relationship, that's great. If you want a huge lab or a medium-sized lab where you may present once a month or once every other month, but you're able to see the big picture, the concept, and contribute in that way. So if you are that kind of person and you go into a lab where the PI is a new investigator and it's only you and the PI and maybe one other person, then you may feel that there is micromanaging, but that's not necessarily the case. Again, it's all about your perspective. So know when you're going in what your expectations are, what you feel comfortable with, because again, it's that the lab culture that's going to kind of shape what you're doing in the lab. And so, and also think about it if it's the culture that's important to you or the project, because sometimes if you're in a good environment, you can learn, you feel like you're thriving, then the project is not what you have to do for the rest of your life. You heard me talk about loving viruses, and now I have a cancer immunotherapy lab, right? And I spent a couple of years working in transplant. So I wouldn't suggest doing everything. Figure out what you're passionate about, what you love, and then that kind of environment. So if it's the project and you're just like, no, I know from personal experience, I want to work in cancer or I want to work in neuro, then again, find that lab culture that supports that.
Thank you. And I mean, the questions from students are really centered around how they can be successful and how they can be competitive and what inspired and influenced you to seek out leadership positions. So can you just talk a little bit about what, and you talked a little bit about what motivated you, but how do you or how did you ascend to the leadership roles that you're in? What was the driving factor behind that? I mean, you could have stayed in the lab and just been, a PI in your lab and focused on your research, but you decided to go for these leadership roles and opportunities. So can you talk a little bit about what motivated you to do that and what qualities it takes to take on those types of positions?
Yes, so I'll try to touch on a couple of things that you said. So you talked about people, some of the students were saying that they wanted to be competitive and how would they get the position. So remember that there's a saying that comparison is the theft of joy, or there's something similar to that. So you are only competing with yourself. So think about what it takes for you to be the best you and focus on that. So for me, sometimes the opportunities were given, which was great. And then sometimes you have to ask. So don't feel shy about that. If you see an opportunity, something that you want to do, they can only tell you no, right? And if they say no, you have to deal with that. That's fine. But some of the opportunities that I've had, for example, my second postdoc was at Johns Hopkins, and I just applied through an ad that was published in Science. And, networking is very important, and a lot of people um, make connections, and that's how they're able to move through their career. But for a few of my positions, I just saw the ad. So for my faculty position here at the University of Maryland, again, I was looking at science and I applied and it worked out. So sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. So use all of the tools that you have available. Uh, I talked about applying. So for that position at Hopkins, the PI was an engineer, had an engineering background, and he hired me to create an artificial cell. I had no idea how you start creating an artificial cell. But I was like, if you give me the opportunity, I will try my best. And it ended up being easier than I thought. And from that, we were able to apply for patents. I was able to get grants, and that really helped. So pushing myself out of my comfort zone. Again, I didn't know, I didn't have a bioengineering degree or that kind of training, but I said, okay, if you give me the opportunity, I'm going to try my best to do what I said I would do. And so we ended up making a nanoparticle, and it ended up working out. So that's it. Again, putting myself in and doing that. Then I was looking for jobs in the DMV in the DC, Baltimore, Maryland, Virginia area. And I saw the ad and I applied. And then things happened. I talked about that, just making my way up from assistant professor to associate professor with tenure. And then for a lot of opportunities, like to have the summer program, they were looking for you to have a leadership position. So I asked our cancer center director at the time, um, request for a leadership position, right? So I just put myself out there, and then waiting for that response was challenging, right? Because you ask, and then again, someone could say no. But he was like, "Oh yes, I think that that would be great. We're thinking about opportunities. Let's set up a meeting." So sometimes you just have to put yourself out there. It may work out, it may not, but you won't know unless you put yourself out there. And when you do that, make sure that you are ready, right? Because then he asked for a meeting. Then, okay, exactly what do you want? What positions are you looking for? And so I had to have a response ready, right? What have I done that would prepare me to be successful in that area? So I talked about graduate recruitment and all of these things that I had done. I was the graduate student president when I was in grad school. I set up journal clubs when I was a postdoc. You know what I mean? Like things that help you and show that you have the potential to lead. And I'm sure all of you have that, but don't be shy. Feel free to highlight your strengths and your talents, right? So that's what's going to help you be successful.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I did touch on this last week as well, but I would say also for the students out there not to overlook outside opportunities. So there might be some, shiny, you know, awesome opportunity that you're looking for. It might be a summer internship and maybe you don't get it, but there are other things that you can do to continue to strengthen your resume, to continue to show that you're invested in research or a particular area of focus. So do work in your community, volunteer. Like Dr. Webb said, she was on the graduate student council and she did all of these other extracurricular things. People who are reviewing your applications are looking at those things as well. So I would say don't overlook them. And maybe, it's not the most, well-paid position, but it goes a long way if you're really motivated to do something, volunteering in the public health clinic, get that research experience, and you never know what doors might open as a result of that volunteer opportunity. A lot of people see you doing those things and they're like, oh, I think this person would be great for this thing that I have. So yeah, don't overlook those opportunities as well. So Dr. Webb, can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned already your Leadership Alliance experience, but for the students out there who have not done the Leadership Alliance yet or are thinking about it, how that specific experience kind of shaped your trajectory and what made you apply?
So I mentioned um, Dr. Green. I didn't say his name specifically, but Dr. Bill Green at Dartmouth came to Prairie View and encouraged me to apply. So when someone offers you the opportunity, make sure that you follow up and follow through. And again, it changed my life. And actually, and I'm going to date myself because I participated in the program in the late 90s. So before most of you were born, right? But I still have friends from back then. So again, it completely changed my life. And what it showed me was all of the wonderful things about science, meaning I did not have a background in immunology. I mentioned that my PI was like, okay, you're going to spend Wednesday afternoons in the library learning about immunology, learning about T cells and B cells. And I found like it was fascinating. And so I was like, oh, I need to do this. This is very challenging. It is one of the hardest things that I've had because immunology has its own, it's like its own language. It has so many acronyms, abbreviations, but it was fun. And then I enjoyed asking questions and doing work in the lab. And I was actually working at the VA at the time, and our lab was an HIV, SIV lab, and the only other lab in the building was a TB lab, so no one came out there. Can you imagine HIV and TB? Um, but during that time, it was really, really instrumental in telling me that I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to work in the field and get my PhD. And not only that, I was able to travel. So we were able to go to meetings. We went to a meeting at NYU, and we also went to a conference, a molecular and cell biology conference in DC. And I was like, I get paid to do research and travel, and then you have to write about it, right? Because if you do the research and no one knows, it doesn't really matter. And so I was like, I get to write, I get to talk about my science, I get to travel for free. And so it was just the best.
Thank you. Um, we have one question in the chat from a student about motivation. They want to know, how do you sound authentic in terms of trying to relay your motivation? I guess like how would you advise students on coming across as authentic either in their applications or in their passion for science?
So that is really key and really great. For example, when I'm interviewing people for medical school, a lot of people will come with the idea of, I want to help. And you can help in many different ways, right? So it's, why do you want to help in this capacity? So I think that it takes some self-awareness and thinking about yourself. And it's not because, oh, my parents want a doctor in the family. Oh, I did well in this science class. Or, oh, I enjoyed this particular patient experience. It's in your core. What really drives you? What do you think about doing? What could you see yourself doing for the rest of your life? When you're in the shower, are you thinking about it? When you wake up in the morning, are you thinking about it? And if you aren't, that's okay, but think about, what do you want to do, right? And then when you're giving your personal narrative, you're sharing a piece of yourself. And so it isn't just like, oh, I have this story. I'm going to share this personal experience. It's like, really, this is who I am. And you want to show what sets you apart. You talked about being competitive. There's so many talented, so many highly determined, educated, inquisitive, motivated students, right? And everybody is deserving of an opportunity. But what uniquely sets you apart for that particular opportunity at that time in that space? And so if you reflect and say, I want to do this, and this is my why, and you can get that to resonate, then that's what's going to get somebody to give you that position or say, okay, I'll give this person a chance. And it can be hard, right? Because you can say, oh, I'm surrounded by all of these people, all of these talented people. But again, think about you. You are uniquely here for a reason. You have a purpose. And so if you can reflect on that and say, if I could do that one thing or those things, that'll be amazing. Think about, and then try to share that. Again, whatever really, and everybody's different. You don't have to talk about some troubling experience that you had, but you don't want it to be some shallow, like surface thing. It has to be something that is a key pivotal moment that you're able to share that shows who you are as a person, what your values are, and what you want to contribute.
Thank you. And we're almost at time, so I'm gonna ask you, if you had one piece of advice or one, parting words for the students here today, what would it be? And what should the takeaway be for them today?
Okay. So you said one thing. I'm going to try to share two really quick. So the first thing I always say this, and if you heard me before, I'll say this. Don't let anyone steal your joy because some people will make side comments and you will take it and hold it in and think about it. And why did they say that? I'm like, let that go. When people say things, they will say it in passing and then never think about it again. But if you take it and you sit with it, it can be disturbing your peace and they're moving about their day. So don't give that energy anytime, any space. Again, think about what makes you happy and focus on that. And again, if it was coming from a good place and it's a criticism that you can take and it adds value, take it for what it was meant and then move on and then keep moving forward with your purpose. Stay encouraged, keep your energy, stay motivated, stay driven, and ask for informational interviews. Let's say you apply and you don't get the position. That's okay. It's a small world. You'll probably see those people again, interact with those people. So that impression that you want to leave them with is okay, the opportunity didn't work out. That wasn't the time, the space for me. But if you have something else, please keep me in mind, right? And so that doesn't dead in that situation because they may have filled all the spots, but someone may drop out. And because you responded favorably and you were very positive, they'll think back and say, why don't I offer that opportunity to that person?
Thank you. And I know I said parting words, but I think this one question in the chat is very important because it's been coming up a lot. It's with students that I've been talking with and that the Leadership Alliance has been talking with. So this student asks, that, or mentions that gap years have been increasingly more popular. So for those that are interested in research, what opportunities would you recommend? If someone's thinking about a gap year, are there specific programs that you have in mind?
Yes. So I mentioned this before. Be intentional. Think about the next step that you want to do and make sure whatever you're filling that gap with, that gap year with, is really going to help you make that next step. I have a postbac program for 2 years, and the students work with me and they're able to get additional time in the clinic if they need it. And they spend the majority of that time, like 70%, doing research. So if you want to do a PhD, make sure that you have that experience. A lot of times students will interview and they've only had a little bit of time in the lab. And when they ask you those thought-provoking questions and you weren't really driving the experiments, it's hard for you to address that. And they want to make sure that the level that you are bringing conceptually is beyond the level of a technician where you were told what to do and you did that. Did you think about the overall question? Did you think about what you were bringing to the project? Did you think about the impact that your research would have? And when you're really first starting out, it's hard to really be able to do that. But as you develop yourself, that becomes easier to do. So if you need a time to do that, do that. If you're applying for medical school, and you think that getting extra research experience could be beneficial, it may, but for medical school, we're really looking at your grades, they're looking at your clinical experience. And so if you don't have enough time in the clinic shadowing and showing you know what it takes to be a doctor, you understand that lifestyle and that commitment, then doing additional research will not really be beneficial. And if you think about taking extra courses, when they're looking at your grades, it's your undergraduate grades. If you're taking graduate courses, it can be helpful because it can show that you can move at that level, but that has no impact on your undergraduate GPA. So don't just take classes because you think that's going to advance. Make sure whatever you do in those next steps is really going to help drive you. If you apply to a master's program and it doesn't have a direct line into a doctoral program or an MD program, then make sure that participating in that program is really, again, going to get you to the next step. Do not go into debt or do other things that are going to take you away from your true purpose and your next goal.
Thank you. I think we'll end on that. So we had a number of students in the chat just saying thank you. They really enjoyed the conversation. It was inspiring. It was motivating. So I do want to make sure that we have your contact information. If students want to reach out, I know there were a number of questions that we did not get to. So Dr. Webb, are you on LinkedIn, or do you want to share your contact information with us for us to share out with the students?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn, and if you put in Tonya Webb and Maryland, I will um, be the first one to come up. Or if you just Google Tonya Webb in Maryland, and I will share my contact information so that you can reach out. Please feel free to reach out if I can answer any questions. If I can help you in any way, please contact me.
Thank you so much. And if students out there, if you're not on LinkedIn, please get on LinkedIn. It's a great tool to network, to learn about opportunities. Please follow the Leadership Alliance. We are on there. We post a newsletter every month with various opportunities. They may not even be affiliated with the Leadership Alliance. So please follow us on all the socials. And we hope you enjoyed today's conversation. We look forward to seeing you again on Wednesday night. And again, thank you, Dr. Webb, for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.